Alrighty, Matthew chapter 8. We're going to read the first couple of stories in Matthew chapter 8 today as we go through this. And I want to really hit on a central theme as we're going through this, and hopefully it will become apparent to you what that theme is as we're going. And so I want to start by just kind of refreshing our memories that Jesus has just finished the Sermon on the Mount. And one of the key things that I want to point out, one of the key components after the Sermon on the Mount, right at the end, it said, he spoke like one with authority. This is going to be important, right? He is in charge. He is the ruler. He is the one who can make the rules. And so as we carry on today, we're going to pick up in chapter 8, verse 1. It says, when Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. So Jesus reached out his hand and he touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. When Jesus said to him, see that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer a gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. All right, so let's just stop right there. So the first story we have of Jesus after he leaves the mountainside and he's coming back down into the village. He's coming into Capernaum, which is famous for many reasons, shall we say. Not often good reasons Capernaum is remembered for, but Capernaum is nonetheless famous. And one of the things that the very first thing you encounter, and this would have been a common sight in the ancient days, the very first thing that he encounters is a man with leprosy outside of the town. And why is that? And I just want to take the moment to kind of explain this, because how many of you here have heard or encountered someone who has contracted leprosy? Not even in the lab? Right? Like, this isn't really a thing anymore, right? And part of that is because we have treatment today. Right? We modern medicine has got to the point we can actually treat people with leprosy. And so if on the rare instance you get it, we can help you. But back then we couldn't. And back then there was, of course, a lot of other stigma with it because of what leprosy is. And what leprosy is, and I just want to make this clear because I think sometimes there's a weird misunderstanding. Some people think of leprosy almost like a skin-eating disease. That's not what leprosy is. What leprosy does is it kills your nerve endings. And because it kills your nerve endings and you don't feel pain, you can break bones, you can get cuts, you can have burns, and none of this and you are completely unaware of this, and things get infected, and then that's when all the gross stuff starts happening, and then people start losing body parts and things fall off and stuff. It's gross. And back then, when you didn't have treatment and you didn't understand what was going on and you just saw these people and they were in horrible shape and horrible conditions and things were happening, people would go, man, like, something going on with you. You did something to somebody. It's funny because we try to pretend like we're enlightened and we've moved past some of these superstitions, and yet the moment that the Blue Jays lost the World Series at 2 a.m, my buddy called me up because he's that superstitious, even though he's super enlightened. He's that superstitious and said, "It's because you talked about it that they lost the game." Right? It's like hard-coded into us. We have these weird things about the world and about seeing patterns where there are no patterns. And one of the things that used to happen is these people with leprosy, they would say, well, you did something to the wrong people and stuff like this. And so they became rejects and outcasts in society. And they would often, in Jewish culture, because Jewish culture is probably one of the more tolerant cultures towards lepers because they didn't just immediately kill them. They at least allowed them to beg for alms. And so they would sit outside of the city and they would beg for money or beg for food, and they would just hope that people would be generous enough to give them enough that they could survive to do it all over again the next day. So it was just a constant repeating pattern. And so it was so feared because people didn't know how leprosy was being spread. And if you know anything about Jewish culture, you know, especially if we look at the Jewish law, that as it's being taught in Exodus and Leviticus, we see that cleanliness and this preparation of ourselves before we go before God is a big deal, right? For someone to touch an unclean person was a big, big deal. Husbands wouldn't touch their wives because they didn't want to be unclean, and then they wouldn't be able to go before the Lord. They couldn't go into temple. This was a huge deal. And by the way, I think this is maybe one of the things that as Christians we really ought to take a firmer look at. How often, although I'm not saying, we got to go through all the purity rituals and the ceremonial washing and stuff, but how often do we take ourselves and purify our own hearts, look at our own lives, and make sure that we are in good condition and in right condition before we ever dare step foot before God and ask God anything? Or do we just step before God and say, God, I want this, I want this, I want this? Right? We need to cleanse our hearts. We need to purify our hearts just as the Jews once cleansed their physical bodies. And the last thing I want to mention about this particular story, about this leper, is look at what he says. And this is going to be the theme for today. In verse 2, he says, Lord, if you are willing, Jesus, if you would be willing to do it, you can make me clean. What's he saying? You have the power. You have the authority. And remember how impactful this is. See, this is one of those things when people say, look, they don't say that Jesus is God, but look at this. The only ones that had authority in the sense over life, over disease, over sickness and health, the only one that had authority in Jewish culture was God. That's it. This is why, by the way, if you're wondering, this is why eventually Jesus gets accused of blasphemy and they eventually crucify him. Because they say, how dare you put yourself next to Christ? But here, right away, someone recognizes who he is. He heard about what was going on in the Sermon on the Mount. He had perhaps seen some of the other healings and miraculous signs that Jesus had been performing before he goes up and does the Sermon on the Mount. And now he sees this and he goes, you are the one. Despite all the other people who came before and said they were the Christ, despite all the other ones who laid claim to being the new Moses, the new Elijah, despite all of them, what I see in you is different, is unique, and I see power, I see authority, and I know it is within your control to take away my disease. But this is what's so cool. He doesn't say, so please take it away. He says, Jesus, if you're willing, if it be your will, God, if it's your will, I know you can do it. And so what's Jesus' reaction? I am willing. And he immediately cleanses him. The disease that no one knew how to cure suddenly was wiped away, and he tells them, go and present yourself to the priest. Now, why would he do this? Because this is how you get readmitted back into society. You would go and present yourself before the priest. The priest would test you, make sure that you were now clean, and once you are deemed clean, you are now able to enter back into society. You're able to join the workforce. You're able to start going to temple again. You're able to be a Jew once more. He brought this man essentially back to life. It is a big, big deal. And all because this man knew where to put his faith. And that's going to be our theme, faith. Where is your faith? Because I want to ask you this. And I think it's because, and I thought a lot about this as I was preparing this. Like I thought about this all week, and I was thinking, like, why do we have such a faith problem in the church? And we even were talking about it this morning before church, where we were talking about all these young people when they come to church and they learn about Jesus and they believe while they're young, and then they go to university and they get challenged and they lose their faith. And I think it has to do with the fact that we live in a world where we no longer have any sort of trust in anything else around us. Right? Think about it. When's the last time you went, oh, I know, let's start with a real easy one. I know I can trust the weatherman because he's always right. Right? No, come on. We're like, well, it's a good ballpark, I guess. They're being kind of hopeful. I hope it's warm. I hope that the snow melts. Please, Jesus, if it be your will, let the snow melt. Right? We do the same thing with our politicians. We don't trust them. We elect them, but we don't trust them. We do it with corporations. We don't trust them. With our different institutions, we don't trust the people that are in power, people that are in authority. And I think this massive level of distrust that has been kind of ingrained into us. And I think and this is where I was thinking about, where I said I was thinking about, like, where did this come from? Because we used to be a high trust society. And I think it's because after World War II, propaganda became the norm and not, the rarity. And because it became the norm, we all just became super skeptical and went, we can't trust anything. And now we have all the scams that are constantly trying to take advantage of us. And so we've just become even more and more and more skeptical. So we're like, the only one I can trust is me. The problem is that we also end up doing that to Jesus. And then we start treating Jesus like the vending machine, right? We want to see results first, Jesus, before I'll put my faith in you. And I think what was wonderful, which I'm not sure, I think I asked this question before, and apparently Brent is the only one that likes listening to debates. But there was a famous debater, maybe you guys have heard of him, his name is Christopher Hitchens. Does anyone know who Christopher Hitchens is? Tragically, he passed, and I really hope that despite the platform that he presented, I really hope that all of his debates with Christians hopefully allowed him to come to know God before he passed away. But the thing that I admired about Christopher Hitchens is that although he was atheist and although he often argued against God, he was at least honest about his particular opinion. Because I'll never forget, there was one particular debate that he did where he said, I'll believe that God is real if I see it written in the clouds, I am God and I am real. And then he said, right, because they were asking, like, what evidence would you need? And that's what he said, written in the clouds. And then he sat back and he thought about it for a second. And he went, you know what? No, I still wouldn't believe, because I know that the moment I saw that, I would think someone was up there with a skywriter doing it with a plane or something like that. Like, there's going to be some natural explanation, or I'm seeing a pattern that's not really there. And at least he had the honesty and the courage to admit, I just don't trust anything that I can't see, taste, or touch, or feel, right? He lost his ability to trust. And that's what faith is. Faith is trust. And so what does that look like? And why should we trust? And so for that, I want us to go into the second half of our story today, which is kicking off in verse 5. It says, when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, asking for help. Lord, he said, my servant lies at home paralyzed, suffering terribly. Jesus said to him, shall I come and heal him? Centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one to go, and he goes, that one to come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed. And he said to those following him, remember the large crowd that came down from the mountain, truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And then Jesus said to the centurion, go, let it be done just as you believed it would. And his servant was healed at that moment. Okay. What have the Jews been through? We just went through the book of Daniel, and I thought that was so important. The Jews get conquered by Babylon, reconquered by Persia, then conquered again by Alexander the Great. This is when things start to go bad. Then Alexander the Great's empire shatters. It is constantly fought over by the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. They are just constantly at war and pulling apart. The Jewish people are being oppressed and persecuted. By the way, the miracle of the Dead Sea Scrolls is that anything survived the purge that happened. Right? The purge comes, a burning scripture, burning tablets, killing people. Over 80,000 Jews were murdered for the very fact that they were Jews. And then after all of that, then comes a new conqueror, Rome, a pagan authority, worshiping false gods. And they come and they conquer and they begin to worship Zeus and praise, Jupiter, because they stole their Greek gods. Praise Jupiter, and they would praise all these great gods. And then as this is going on, right, of course these people are getting more and more agitated. And I'm sure you guys have heard of the Zealots. They were a political faction within Israel, and they were not having it because they were like, you know what? We've been pushed over for too long, and we're going to fight back. Nobody liked Rome. Nobody liked Romans. The reason I'm putting such emphasis on this is as he enters into the city, the first one he meets is a Roman. Jesus doesn't veer away. Jesus doesn't despise him. Jesus immediately talks to him. The first thing the dude says is Lord, acknowledging he is a man. Jesus is a man of authority, of power. And the next thing he says, he gives him a request. Look, Lord, my servant is at home. This is going on. And he says, well, can I come heal him? And he says, no. I do not deserve it. I don't deserve for someone of your power, your authority to come under my roof. But I know the type of power you have, for I am a man of power. And then how does Jesus describe the Roman centurion? He says he was amazed. This verse 10, Jesus was amazed. Now, just think on what this says. And says, truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel, not a single Israeli, not a single Hebrew, no one who calls themselves a Jew, no one who calls themselves a follower of Yahweh, not one who's dedicated their life to following the Torah, not one who's worshiped at temple every single week, not one who's spent their entire life understanding the scrolls and the prophets. Not one of these people had the faith of a Roman. You imagine if someone off the street just came in here today, they were talking to me and I said, wow, you're the best Christian I've ever seen. Everyone else in here is despicable compared to you. Right? Like, Jesus is not afraid to be offensive when it's true. He does not worry about whether or not he's going to hurt the feelings of those that are following. In fact, it says he turned around, he faced the crowd that was following him, and he said, I can't believe how strong this man's faith is. All of you that I've met in Israel, everyone I've met across this land, no one has the faith of this Roman. Why? Because this Roman, he understood power, he understood authority, he understood what was going on, and he saw in Jesus authority. He saw in Jesus power. And then what Jesus says next, again, for people that go, I don't understand why he was so controversial. This is it. I say to you, many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham. He's not talking about Jews coming from the east and the west. He's not talking about the special people of God. He's not talking about those chosen Hebrews that were brought out of the land of Egypt. He's talking about Gentiles. And he's saying many of them are going to join one day right here at the feast of the Lamb in the kingdom of heaven. Which, by the way, is great news for us. Right? The table's open, the place is set, but what is required? As Jesus said to the centurion in verse 13, go, let it be done just as you believed it would. And his servant was healed in that moment. Was the servant healed because as a Roman he made sure he did the right things in the right order and he worshiped the right God? No, this guy was probably pretty mixed up. Right? Given that he obviously recognized Jesus, saw his power, saw his authority, he obviously had his faith right there in that moment. But I bet you growing up as a Roman, he definitely was bringing sacrifices to Jupiter. He was definitely offering things to Saturn, to Mercury. By the way, if you're noticing, yes, kids, all of our planets are named after Roman gods. It's interesting. It's interesting that even he who had such a mixed up background was able to finally come. He came and he was rubbing shoulders with the Jews long enough that he was hearing them speak their scriptures. He was hearing them teach in their synagogues, and he began to see and understand, wait a minute, there is something happening here in this holy land, in this special place. And then when Jesus shows up and miracles start happening, he goes, this is what we've been waiting for. It was an outsider, a pagan, a Gentile, whom Jesus said had the greatest faith that he saw in all of the land of Israel. And so as we come to a close of today's message, this is the thing that I wanted to push us on, because again, I think there is a real faith crisis, not only in the church, but across our entire society. And I think it's unfortunate, but it is something that has happened. We don't trust anyone. We don't trust anything. We just don't trust anymore. And so when we're going around and we're telling people about Jesus, and we're saying, yes, you can trust in Jesus, it's understandable why people go, well, how do I know I can trust in Jesus? Because all they've ever known is disappointment. All they've ever known is people that have let them down, corporations that let them down, politicians that let them down, leaders that let them down, and so they can't feel like they can trust anyone anymore. Again, we were talking about this morning. This is why it's so important for us to understand our Bible, to know what we believe, to understand what we believe, and have our faith, our trust built on the rock, as Jesus described. Let's build it on something real, something firm, something strong. Let's build it on Christ. Here's the beauty of my faith, of the faith of the church, is we don't have to guess. We know a man named Jesus was born and he lived and died. We know that many followed him. We know that many followed them and never recanted. We know that thousands of people after that, millions of people, have gone on to live and serve Jesus Christ. We hear about miracle after miracle, sign after sign, event after an event. And so the question becomes, are you going to put your faith in all of the accounts, all the eyewitnesses, all of the testimonies, all of the things that have come before, or not? The question is, you can only put your faith in that testimony. You can only understand those eyewitness accounts if you actually go and hear them, read them, know them for yourself. Right? I can't make you hear them. Only you can. This is why I often encourage people to listen to audio Bibles. There's so many free ones out there now. Right? Just get the word in. Hear the words of Jesus. If you got the time, sit there and read along while you're with it. Ask questions. And ask questions of each other. Grow in your faith and understand that Jesus is worth your trust. In a world where trust has come at a premium, where trust has become a rare commodity, I want you to know that there is still one. Jesus is still one. He is super reliable. He does not change. He does not falter. He doesn't change his mind. He doesn't do anything different. He is who he is, and always will be. And that's hard for us to grasp because, again, we have a trust problem in North America. But I think once you take that leap of faith, once you take that step and you decide, you know what, I'm going to investigate it for myself, you'll find that there are all kinds of reasons to say, you know what, the centurion was right. That leper was right. They recognized the authority of Jesus, and it was by the Lord's will that their lives were changed forever. So if you want your life to change forever, you got to start by putting your faith in the right place.